Hey guys, Matt Allen here. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. Today we're talking wintertime jig fishing. Jig fishing is one of my absolute favorite things to do. I don't care what time of year it is. I'm more obsessive about jig fishing than almost anything else except maybe swim baits. I have boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes of jigs. I'm not kidding, boxes. Almost just as many trailers. I love jig fishing, and a lot of people do because you can catch a lot of fish, but one thing that sets a jig apart is its ability to catch giant fish. It's amazing how many monster bass every year are caught on a jig. Wintertime is prime time. So today, I'm actually keeping it extremely simple. I really am. Today is not talking to the entire country, okay? I'm talking to 90% of anglers with this video. I'm talking to the core of bass fishing. Most people are on reservoirs where there's been some level of drawdown. There's less cover in the water than you would have in the summertime, and the jig is an amazing tool. To the guy that's down in the heart of Florida or the deep south and you've still got a lot of vegetation, the bulk of this will not apply to you. One thing will though. I did keep one thing in here for you, but this video is for the average angler. It's for you to understand how to throw a jig, because the winter is a fantastic time to learn how to do it. I like to keep my jig fishing in the winter as simple as possible. It's basically 3 or 4 baits. I mean, that's it. 99% of what I do is with some sort of a football jig, okay? The finesse football. This is a Dirty Jigs finesse football. Both of these are just 2 different colors. The finesse football has a very light wire hook in it, but it's a full-size jig. That is my number one confidence bait right there. 1/2 ounce finesse football. The color is SuperMatt brown. The skirt is, or the trailer is a Yamamoto 5-inch double tail grub, cinnamon purple with black flake. That's simple. I mean, I have so much confidence in that. It's crazy. It's worked from coast to coast, top to bottom, and it's done it for decades. Now, there's a time and a place for different colors. There's a time and a place for different sizes. I'm going to jump to this one really quickly. Again, if I can only have one, hands down, it's a finesse football. That right there, that's a finesse football in Canterbury Crunch is the name of that color. So this is my very cinnamon and purple type color. This is more of my green pumpkin type color. If you are a guy in the south where you've got more vegetation, if you're a guy up north, but your lake just tends to have more wood in it, right? If you throw a football jig, they just get hung up too much. This is a compact pitching jig. Literally, this is the tip that applies to everyone. Literally the same skirt, same size, same trailer, similar hook. It's a slightly heavier hook, but it's a pitching style head, and it will come through cover better. So if you have a ton of cover, throw that one. Otherwise, set every other jig aside, and this winter, just focus in on that football. They just work. They work so well. I've fished them a few different ways. Typically when I'm fishing a jig, let's talk about the where, the when, the how, all that, and then we'll talk about trailers and the rest of this stuff. But the where, when, how of this whole thing, I like to throw a jig on hard structure. What I mean by that is that a lot of the fish in the lake have pulled to the outside points, okay? They're not in the backs of the coves anymore. That's not to say all the fish have done this, but the majority of the good ones have. They've pulled to outer points, they've pulled to breaks, island tops, creek edges, places where the 2 arms come together, the lake is necking down, you've got the points on the edges of that. those are those key pinch points, those key locations. So take this point behind me. Large point coming out. I don't know if you guys can even see far enough to see it, but it's got a bunch of chunk rock on it. I'll follow that chunk rock out until I stop hitting rock. If it turns to mud or something else or goes to deep water, I'll come back up to that last outer rock. That's where I focus on with my jig. It's crazy this time of year how much a bass will focus in on hard bottom, and I mean rock. Whether that's a mud flat that's got a little section with pebbles on it, or that's a big rocky area and there's one spot that has even bigger boulders. They take that best rock. They love to sit there, and that's the stuff that I pick apart with the jig. It's funny because I can't count the number of times I'll be working my jig, I'll be pulling that football, and I like to do a couple of things. Sometimes I just pull them and let them sit. Pull them, let them sit. It's almost dead action. It's almost no movement. In fact, if you guys have watched a lot of our footage, you've seen a lot of videos where I'm doing it one-handed. The water's cold, so I take my other hand, I stick it in my pocket. It's freezing out, right? Water's cold, air's cold. So I've got one hand in my pocket, and with my other one, I wish I had a rod to show you. I don't have a casting rod on the deck right now. My hand is large, so I can reach around my reel and actually reach my handle with my middle finger. And I'll just pull, and then with my middle finger, spin the handle. Pull, spin the handle. I don't even bother to use two hands because it's so stinking cold out. But that method of just slow pulling those jigs can be highly effective. That is why on all of my full-size jigs, I use those double tails. Double-tailed grubs in the coldest water continue to have some movement. Now specifically, I'm using the Yamamoto 5-inch double tail. And the reason I bring that up is that there are tons of double-tailed grubs on the market. That one will continue to move in crazy cold water. If the grub you're using is made of a more rigid plastic, the colder the water gets, it'll actually get more rigid and it will stop working, and those two arms will just be dragging. They won't be working their way through the rocks. This is a time of year where the fine little details matter. So I specifically use that 5-inch double tail grub, that Yamamoto, on the back of those baits, because I know that even if my water's in the 30s or the 40s, as it's dragging over the rocks, those tails are continuing to have a little bit of movement. It's amazing when you're doing that slow pull, just dunk, there they are. But what I started to say is I've lost track of the amount of times that I'll be pulling that thing on a mud bottom, and then all of a sudden, bump, 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 like, oh, I think that was rock. Pull it again, bump, bump, bump. It is rock. Okay, here it comes. Bump, 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 dong, there's the fish. They sit right glued to that rock. When you feel that thing start to bounce on rock, like the hair on the back of my neck stands up, like here comes the bite. I know it's gonna happen. I love this technique. Now, here is something that is completely overlooked. Similar to that 5-inch double tail, this is Yamamoto's Hula Grub, also called a spider jig, okay? This guy is a double tail grub, but it's got that plastic skirt that's part of it. Why do these things work so well in the winter? I have no idea. It's beyond me. I personally catch bigger fish on the jig, and that's why I focus the bulk of my attention on the jig. But if you know that you've got a jig bite and you get out there today and they're just not doing it, sometimes the Hula Grub turns that bite back on. I don't know, it just works. So I didn't want to completely skip over it. So just a bare football head. I like to fish the Hula Grub, no skirt, or I'm sorry, no weed guard, just bare head. And I just thread this on here. And again, in the video description, we do this with every video if you're not familiar. We'll link the exact jigs, the size, my favorite color, my favorite trailer, favorite color, the exact football head I'm putting into this, the rod that I'll use for that jig, the rod I'll use for this jig, the rod we'll use for these tiny jigs we haven't talked about. There's more information in the video description of every video than there actually is in the video itself. So if you're not using those descriptions, you're actually missing about half of the information in any given video. We put a ton of time into those descriptions to make sure that you can find exactly what you're looking for. So that right there is a Hula Grub. Similar concept, obviously a little more rigid on the skirting, a lot less of it. Don't ask me why this thing with an unpainted head and this silly skirt can catch them on days when a jig won't, but it does. It's amazing. These caught my attention, man, I don't even want to say how long ago. A really long time ago, my friend Bob was in a winter tournament on a lake that was not known for big fish and stuck a 13-pounder on a Hula Grub. A 13-pound largemouth on a lake where like 7 to 10 pounds for a limit was winning. And that was a light bulb moment for me. That's when the Hula Grub joined my arsenal. And over the years, I don't catch a lot of big ones on it. That fish was a freak for sure, but I catch a ton of fish on it. And it's just a confidence thing. When you need to know if that bite is there, that's an amazing way to go. And then last, but certainly not least, let's talk about the little guys. The mini jigs, the micro jigs, whatever you want to call them. I like to call them micro jigs. When the going gets tough in the winter, I turn to the little tiny jigs. This is a Kitech tungsten jig. This is a Nishini, okay? I've got 2 trailers. I'm gonna rig both of them while we're sitting here talking. Here, this one first. So, I like to throw these at the same time that I throw my larger football. Anytime I go out in winter and I intend to throw a jig, I tie on both a full size, I tie on that one, my full size, and then I tie on one of my micro jigs just to test the bite. I fish them both every day. I fish them on very different rods, a very different line, but the beauty of the micro jig is I fish it on a shorter rod. I fish it on an X-Pride 610 medium heavy. So a little heavier than my jerkbait rod, but I'm able to throw it on light line. I could throw it on braid to 8-pound or braid to 10-pound, or I could fish it on straight 8 or 10-pound fluoro, and you can still set that hook. So the beauty of this is that you're able to get more bites because you're able to go to lighter line. That's the concept of all these finesse baits in general. Again, I'm throwing a finesse football, even for my big ones. The reason why is that when the water is cold, the fish are more lethargic. They tend to not pull as hard. So I go to that lighter wire hook so that I can go to lighter line so that I can get more bites. Even those larger footballs, I'll tend to throw on 12-pound, typically braid to 12-pound leader. If you prefer fluoro, you could throw it on straight 12-pound fluoro. The only time that I go heavier is if I go to a 3/4 or heavier football jig. Like I'm fishing deep and I want to be really connected to it. And I go up to that 3/4, which I do a lot. Then I tend to go to 15-pound line. Just because when a fish comes up to jump, if they've got enough oomph to even jump, a lot of times in the winter they can't even jump, they're too cold. But if they can, a 3/4 ounce jig flapping in front of their mouth is really easy to rip out. So that 15-pound line just lets me pull harder to try and knock them down, keep them from jumping. But generally 12-pound for my standard jigs and 8 or 10 for my little guys. Again, Z-Man, TRD Craws. I'm talking instead of rigging. I have so much confidence in this setup. So much confidence. Except I just went long. Come on, Matt. There we go. So there's the Nishini with the TRD Craws on it. And then this one I started experimenting with this year. I'm always looking. Demiki Air Craw. The claws are totally hollow. They've got air in them. Now it's a little long. This is the 3-inch, okay? It's a little long. I pull the first couple of these little guys off, the little nubs. Set those out of the way here. And then I take maybe 1/2 inch off. And that seems to be perfect. So this is the Keitech. The biggest difference between the Keitech and the Nishini in terms of fishability is the Keitech has a little thin weed guard. The Nishini has no weed guard at all. If you are fishing a fairly open bottom, go no weed guard. Your hookup ratio is incredible. And again, you can do it with such light line. There's that Demiki air craw on that Keitech. How good does that look? The Keitech is also a fuller skirt. See how it's puffed out more? The Nishini likes to lay down flat, but these are both killers. And you'll see me throw both of them all winter long. So again, I'll tie on my full size and my micro every single day that I go out. I tend to start out throwing the full size. And if it's working, I just keep right on going. But if the conditions change, if it goes to bluebird skies, slick, calm, I feel like maybe the bite's shut down, straight to that micro jig so I can keep catching fish. But guys, I keep it that simple. Again, if you're a guy in the deep south, you still got hydrilla lines and reeds in the water. A lot of this doesn't apply to you. But that's not the core of the country. Most of us are on reservoirs. The water's been pulled, the fish have backed out, they're on hard structure. The jig is an amazing way to catch these fish. It will catch a lot of fish, it will catch monsters, and I do it very simply. I mean, basically 3 or 4 baits is it, couple of trailers, and I'm done. I keep it that simple. Again, in the video description, I didn't even get into rods, right? That's a whole nother video, but in the description, I'll list the rods for each bait. I'll give you my favorite sizes, like the Keitech. I like to go up to a 1/2 ounce. That's a 1/2 ounce in a tiny little jig. But because it's tungsten, I can do that. And it's still a super slim profile. The Nishini, I tend to go a little bit lighter. It's just finding the balance, right? But I'll put all that stuff down there for you. Hopefully this helps you. Hopefully this gives you some confidence. If you can only have one, it's that guy right there. But throw a jig this winter, put some time into it. I think you will be amazed by the results. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon.